Hello. Welcome to another battleship inspection in World of Warships. And we're re-inspecting the Lauria. Why? Well, had a request to play it on the stream, and we had a couple of pretty banger back-to-back Lauria games. And I believe my original Lauria review was really just a rant review, and that might have even been pre-Legmog Colombo era. Right, where I basically said like the boat is crazy overpowered, stupid game design, yada yada yada, incredibly broken, busted, etc. Yeah, it still is. It doesn't really matter that Legmod Colombo is in the game. Lauria is still probably one of the best battleships you can take into random battles. Still, it's absolutely fucking crazy. Why is Lauria crazy? Well, Lauria combines an armor scheme that's almost as good when you're bowing as Kremlin, with speed that is close to Bourgogne with speed boost up, with concealment that is nearly best in class, as you can see here, 12.3, with a 457 overmatch that has sap. And if you look at the raw numbers, Lauria has about 20% less raw DPM than Colombo. However, Lauria, even compared to Legmog Colombo, is significantly more accurate, and you, of course, overmatch 30 millimeters of armor, unlike Colombo's 25. Now, Lauria has quite a few downsides. We could call them downsides compared to a Colombo. Now, the issue that I have with Lauria downs, and typically when people talk about Lauria versus Colombo, they will list all of Lauria's, they will list these downsides for you. That are technically downsides. However, the problem with Lauria's downsides is they're basically pure cope from bad players. Um, you know, People will often say like, well, Colombo has better sap damage output. It's actually not even really correct at all. It has more raw sap damage output, so if you're shooting a gigantic target like a broadside main with sap, yeah, you're better off to be in a Colombo compared to a Lauria. But when you factor in the accuracy, if you're good at aiming, a Lauria has very, very almost identical effective DPM with the sap compared to Colombo. But of course, it has more pen, which doesn't really matter if we're being honest. It matters against a few cruisers. Um, but mostly it's having the 30 overmatch, which means a ton of the cruisers' decks get overmatched and bows. You can fight USN, you can fight, basically any heavy cruiser in the game, aside from the armored ones, get overmatched somewhere by Lauria Sap. And deck is the most important thing, obviously, to overmatch in this game, because that's the funny lull damage at long range. Back to the downsides, though, that people mention. Lauria has a low HP pool. Yeah, for a tier 10 BB, the HP is a bit low. Now, does having low HP matter when you have almost Kremlin armor? Crazy concept, but I'm going to go ahead and say no, not really. Lauria maneuvers like a brick. Horrible turning circle. Mediocre rudder shift. Yeah, technically true. Okay. Well, you can go dark at will because you have 12.3 km detection. So it doesn't really matter that you are a brick and go flat for 20 years because you can never be spotted if you don't want to be spotted. Yeah. Lauria doesn't have very good torpedo protection. Yes, true, correct. So they gave it improved Citadel healing of 33%. Much better than the average BB that gets about 10%. So we're running out of downsides that are real downsides. Kind of is what I'm getting at. Having low HP with god tier armor and insane speed means your low HP is pure cope and not an actual not even a mitigating asset, mitigating circumstance. Having an exposed Citadel, yes, very exposed Citadel, in multiple ways. Some that are unique. We'll look at the armor at the end of the review, as always. And you're clumsy, so when you go flat, you're flat for days. You have a giant Citadel with not the greatest protection platings, and so you get nuked, right? Well, no, because you just can go dark and then game return. Also, you sit crazy low in the water, so there's that too. So then we can get to, why people consider Colombo guns a bit better than Lauria guns. And that is just fully a skill issue. There's really no sugarcoating that one. And I say this as someone who, has skill issues, right? I mean, one of Colombo's biggest asset it has over Lauria is Colombo has railgun shell velocity. Obviously, it makes no sense given the gun caliber, but, wargaming fantasy land. So Colombo shells are a lot faster than Lauria. You have a lot more shells. They're a lot less accurate. And so when you shoot at people in Colombo, it's virtually impossible to do less than about 10,000 damage. Whereas in Lauria, yeah, if you mislead, if you misaim, guess what, buddy? You're not hitting shells on people. So, this is about the same dispersion as Thunder. It's almost identical dispersion. And so if you are missing and misaiming, you do not get very good damage in the Lauria. But like I said, complete skill issue. And Lauria is very fun, I think. There are ships in this game that this is more of a subjective opinion, obviously. But there are ships in the game that are incredibly overpowered, like Colombo and like Libtard. And in my opinion, they're just no fun to play at all, really, because you're just kind of like this lumbering turret that just creeps around the map. You just slam inaccurate shells into people for way too much damage than you should. Or, in the case of Libtard, you just farm with the secondaries. They're mindless ships. Colombo and Libtard are both very, very mindless. And Lauria is a much more, to me at least, a much more interesting thing. And here we've got the AP loaded. We've got a flat irresistible. He does not have the best Citadel protection because he is a Marlboro hull. And unfortunately, we get the Dev Strike robbed because I think Minnesota or Willem de Ursta hit him for like 15k right before. So instead of 4 or 5 sits, we only get 3. But the AP is actually very, very good in a way. Basically, it's Ohio AP, but it unfortunately has fast fuse. Now, if you are a real human being who plays the video game and uses your brain and your eyeballs, you know that fast fuse AP is like on a BB, to be clear, on a battleship, fast fuse AP is pure dog shit, basically, and robs you of the ability to punish a shit ton of ships in this game past a certain range. And Lauria is a perfect example of that. Think of a ship like a flat broadside Vermont. Ohio and Lauria have virtually identical shell velocity, virtually identical AP penetration. Ohio has normal fuse, Lauria has fast fuse. When Vermont goes flat to Ohio at 15, it gets dev struck. It takes big black ribbons. When Vermont goes flat to Lauria at 15, it doesn't. And that's not because Lauria lacks the pen. It has almost identical pen to Ohio. It is because Vermont has a bit of spaced armor. And when you're shooting at ships with a bit of spaced armor, once you get to a certain range, your shells lose a bit of velocity, and you just completely lack the ability to get citadels on a ton of ships. Really almost like any battleship with spaced armor, even if you technically have the pen to citadel them, around like 13, 14 kilometers, you just start getting full pens on the side plating. If they've got anything that's spaced, you're just kind of fucked. It also really, really, really griefs you trying to citadel certain BBs to the bow. You're getting run at by something like a St. Vincent. Something like an Ohio shooting its bow can easily 40 to 50k it. Something like Lauria shooting its bow, it's very, very, very challenging to get citadels in that situation because the shells arm on the 10-degree angle of the bow slope, and they detonate in the bow itself. And sure, you get full pens, but you basically can't get citadels. Now, obviously, the improved penetration, I believe it's 114 millimeters of armor, is interesting because that is enough to get through a decent amount more ships than Colombo. Colombo can go through Sphia, and we're talking about Sap Citadels, to be clear. Colombo can Citadel with Sap, Sphia, and Smolensk, which have 70 millimeter Citadel belt. And it can do the same to Colbert with 80, and it can do the same to Austin and Jinan with 95. But it cannot Citadel, Minotaur, and Brisbane, which, if I'm not mistaken, have like 103 millimeters of Citadel protection. Plymouth, can't Citadel Plymouth, this does. And then kind of a fringe example is Essex. Or not Essex, excuse me. Malta. Malta has, I think it's like exactly 114 millimeter Citadel bow. I know it's a funny amount. But there's a decent amount of ships, and these ships are quite common. I mean, there'll be a Minotaur on the enemy team every 3 or 4 games, right? Um, so it's not like the craziest asset in the world, but it is definitely worth noting that ships like Minotaur and Brisbane and Malta can be sap citadel by this thing. But you have this combination of insane speed and insane armor, and that combination on the Lauria really makes you just like unbelievably tanky when you're pushing in, and that is combined with the firing angles. Now, they're not quite as retarded as Colombo. Colombo, I think, is like 22, 23-degree forward firing angles. So these are definitely not that, but they are 30 front and rear. That's a little, you know, basically hit every shell on Shima moment. And now we're pushing in against the sub. And like with Colombo, one of the greatest assets of a ship like Lauria is, of course, sap against subs is just fucking demonic. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy how much damage sap does to submarines. This is true of Colombo as well, but I mean, you could dev strike full HP subs in a ship like Lauria if you hit all 8 sap shells because you were given, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's like 1/6 damage on sap hits on DDs. It's significantly improved splash damage with the sap. You see there, like 4 hits takes, we're getting like 3,000 damage per hit, right? It's kind of crazy. So you're really good against subs. And the way to look at Lauria is kind of like if you're thinking of Colombo versus Lauria. Colombo is inarguably better at farming battleships. There's definitely no way of getting around that. Colombo into battleships is crazy because it just shits out so many shells. Battleships are huge. You get big, giant damage. Yes. But I would argue Lauria is the indisputed demon against cruisers. There's just so many cruisers in the game. Overmatching 30 in tier 10 is really wild. I mean, even like this Essex. This Essex has he has a 30 millimeter deck. Now, I'm not leading enough. There you go. We were just talking about the skill issue that comes when you miss aim with Lauria shells, right? So we still get 15k, which we probably wouldn't really get with Colombo because we wouldn't overmatch Essex's deck. But then again, we would also vomit out so many shells. Maybe we just hit his side plating, right? But overmatching 30 is incredibly, incredibly crucial. And of course 27, right? Something like a Bowen Des Moines, Hindenburg, these kind of ships. You look at the kind of games you get into, and there's just a lot of 30 and 27 millimeter in a lot of games, right? In a lot of games, there's some fringe situations. Like I think most people are familiar with Napoli, a ship that goes flat to low caliber guns. 406s are low caliber guys. Who am I to deny Wargaming's statements about their own game? But you can dev strike something like that because you have the 30 overmatch. Essex deck, all of the USN and, all of the heavy cruisers that aren't Russian have 30 decks, in tier 10 and Napoli, right? They basically all have 30 decks, or 30 side plating or 27 bows. So, you basically what you give up with Lauria is you give up the consistency per salvo because you don't have the 16 shells vomiting out, but you gain the ability to overmatch and lol pen just the insane amount of ships that you fight in tier 10. You gain, when you know what you're doing, significantly better armor. You gain significantly better speed, significantly better concealment. It's more of a game impact playmaking ship than Colombo. Colombo is more of a farming simulator experience. Um, that is not to say, obviously, that Lauria is better than Colombo, because I don't really think in random battles, unfortunately, at this point, any BB is quote unquote better than Colombo. But I would go so far as to say Lauria is, in your average game, you play 100 games in Lauria and Colombo. Lauria is going to be about 90 to 95% as good as Colombo in the average game, but you are going to have a decent amount of games where Lauria is legitimately just going to be better. And it's really just the matchmaker. There are certain matchmakers where Colombo gets like bizarrely fucked over, and I would say it's just really down to the kind of cruisers that you get into fights with. If we can kind of look at this, right? They've got a Carno. Obviously Edgar, Utrecht, these are ultralights. Colombo overmatches them everywhere. Colombo is the objectively better ship against those two cruisers, right? But then look at the other cruisers in this lobby, right? We've got a Carno, we've got a Condi, we've got a Buffalo. If those ships properly angle to, properly angle as in go perfectly bowing, because that's all you can do against Colombo, go perfectly bowing. But if they go perfectly bow into a ship like Colombo, they don't really take hardly any damage. Um, and Lauria will like 15 to 25k them on cooldown, right? And so that's kind of the thing that we're getting at is, I would argue in this matchmaker, Colombo, right? We're just talking about the guns, obviously. Colombo guns, a bit better than Lauria guns because there's only one cruiser where Lauria overmatch matters. However, if I was on the enemy team, then I would much, much rather be in the Lauria versus the Colombo, right? But Lauria's speed is definitely something that like should not be taken for granted because look at that dispersion, by the way. No improved dispersion on these guys. It's actually, see, this is why Colombo's better. See there? Look at that. I slightly aimed too far to the right, and I'm so accurate that I got 0 damage. Colombo probably hits 2 or 3 shells, right? So there you go. Colombo, objectively superior ship for bad players like me. And so, but you're able to dictate the engagement super effectively. Yeah, something like a Bungo, Thunderer, Conqueror, Incomp, these ships you can't really dictate the engagement against, but even against something like a Libtard, because of the speed, guys, part of it is the speed. It's not just the concealment. It's the ability to get away from almost any ship. I mean, we're not running Brisk, obviously, as you've noticed, but even not running Brisk, Lauria just with this speed flag, because you have to keep in mind this ship goes 35 knots base, which is fucking retarded, but it goes about 37 knots base. Just, I mean, there you go. Like, yeah, Colombo does do more damage per salvo, right? A good Colombo salvo into this guy would be 30k, but you also, something we haven't even mentioned yet is the reload, right? This thing has about an 8-second better, 8.5-second better reload than Colombo. Ledge mod Colombo is a 35-second reload. Reload mod Lauria is a 20. It's just said right there, 26.4. Yeah, 26.4-second reload, right? So you get a lot more follow-up shots, and this really comes into play, really crucially, if you can farm the Sansonetti Confederate buff, which isn't super hard to get these ships because like often one salvo is 20% of the enemy ship's HP that you're fighting, right? But you can get Lauria on, half HP Sansonetti buff down to a 20-second reload. And then, you're talking, I mean, that's just insane, obviously. Like 20-second reload on, better than Repub reload, but shooting sap, like fucking ridiculous, obviously. But Lauria's speed lets it be very, very good, especially like as the game progresses. You can say that about a lot of ships, obviously. Certain ships become better the later in the game for different reasons, but Lauria becomes really crazy later in the game because of its speed. Um, it's able to kind of fly around the map. You don't really have to commit hard to a certain positioning in Lauria because you have, this speed 37 knots without Brisk. You have this speed to always be somewhere, We started middle and then we kited over to like C8 and now I assume I assume my team with 3 DDs at C has everything well in hand, so I want to push middle and deter Mecklenburg from taking middle position. But we can just fly over here, and something that you may have noticed that I'm going to draw your attention to now. What you might have noticed is I'm kind of not losing much speed when I turn. And Yeah, Lauria is one of those ships where it just has, and you see there, like, obviously we're still getting 15k on saturated superstructure. It's just that we got to lead a bit more. We got to be way more precise with our aim, right? You don't just aim slightly above upper belt and click 16 sap shells with Colombo into somebody. Um, you actually have to aim in Lauria. And that is, I mean, listen, is it ridiculous to call that a downside? Yeah, sure. But, it is worth mentioning. It is a downside. The fact that you have to almost always exercise skill and ability versus mindlessly clicking randomly near a ship, yeah, that does make Colombo easier to play, obviously. But what makes Lauria so much more engaging, so much more fun, uh, is that speed and that kind of like really crazy armor. The superstructure is very small, not quite. We're not quite at the Kremlin level, right? And I mean, this is my point, right? We're shooting this Mecklenburg, Colombo at this range and angle. Given that his superstructure is saturated, we're going to expect somewhere around 15 to 25k out of Colombo. Probably more in the low to mid 20k range, right? 20 to 25k. But Laurie is still getting 15k a salvo, and like I said again, I mean the reload. We have barely any AR kicking in, but we're getting 17k. I think that was back to back 17k sap volleys, but they're coming every 25 seconds compared to Colombo's 35 seconds, right? So I really think that the Lauria has been like unfairly maligned. It kind of like my ultimate takeaway. I want to stress, but here, okay, look at this. I'm overleading, right? You see this? I'm miss aiming. Colombo probably would 10k that guy, right? I would still be miss aiming in Colombo, but it's inaccurate and has the shell count to compensate for your bad aim, right? And so, um, what I would say is it sounds ridiculous because it's a sap ship, but Lauria is like on the higher end of the skill tree. I do legitimately believe when it comes to playing BBs, and maybe that is why it's kind of been unfairly maligned. Is yeah, if you don't know what you're doing in Lauria, you are going to suffer hard. If you are not good at leading, Ohio shells, Vermont shells, right? Basically, very similar experience playing Lauria. Um, if you are not good at leading slow shells, you don't get very good damage even shooting overmatch sap. If you fuck up your angling against a guy who knows how to aim, it may in fact be a back to port. Um, a lot of that's cope. Obviously, battleships like I have gone flat in Lauria hundreds of times to BBs at close range, and like I have maybe twice gone back to port. I should have gone back to port every time, obviously, but the battleship community. They cope, right? We talk about this all the time. They pretend like when they go flat and they're incomparable in their Lauria, in their Marlboro, whatever you want to say, that they just get nuked on cooldown. And it's like, yeah, you get nuked every like 4 or 5 times, but you know, it's not anywhere near what cruisers experience, obviously, right? So game's looking pretty bad, and I honestly was very close to making this an episode of Turbo Throws. So we almost could treat this as a reinspection slash turbo throw episode because yeah, my team is in fact down 4 to 8 on boats. Yes, we are down 4 to 8 on boats, and we are going to somehow win because they are just going to lose. Now, to be fair, there's not like a lot that these guys I'm pushing into, right? But yeah, we're just gonna start pushing in. But you can see like kind of how all over the map I've been this game, right? I've kind of gone all over the map, um, and that's something just really, really underrated about Lauria. It's the always up speed. But you see here, like we're actively maneuvering, and we only ever go down to about 30 knots, right? Um, which is interesting because there's quite a few battleships that even have speed boosts and go and lose more percent of their speed, right? We're going from 37-ish down to 39-ish knots when we actively maneuver in Lauria. And that is not a ton of speed loss, right? I mean, we're only losing, about 25% of our speed when actively maneuvering, which, you know, to me is like really weird. But you can also see too that when we straighten our rudder out, we we very quickly go back up to speed, right? So see there, those Jaeger torps are hitting me. They're doing pretty good damage. But you can also see that despite taking all of those torps, I've got a decent I can basically use a full efficiency heal still. And that's that 33% Citadel healing coming in clutch. Is really nice. So, Wargaming, God bless their souls, but they love to do this thing. I don't know why I'm healing, by the way. I'm not healing. They love to do this thing where you give a ship quote unquote downsides, and then in the very same ship, I mean, look at that. Look at this acceleration. It's not, Vermont, it's not OG Libtard, it's not Indiana Clown Car levels, but like we're already up to like we're pushing 25 knots already, just 10 seconds after leaving from zero, and you're just able to get up and go super fast in this boat. When you touch the rudder, you don't lose a ton of speed. And even though when you do lose that speed, it's kind of like the second you straighten your ship out, you immediately go back up, right? So there you go. We went perfectly flat. He has the penetration, believe it or not, Mecklenburg AP. At that range, yes, he actually has the AP pen to get upper belt sits, because this has a very weird citadel. But he's slightly underled because I'm going well over 30 knots after being just at a standstill. He wasn't prepared for it. Slightly under leads, doesn't get citadels. And I'm again able to dictate the engagement because it's not just the concealment, right? Vermont has the concealment. Vermont has the concealment to dictate like one engagement. One engagement can be dictated by Vermont, but then you're stuck. Whereas in here, like I'm safe to shoot. I assumed, to be honest with you, I assumed he had AP loaded, which is why I shot when I did, but he didn't have AP loaded. So it didn't really end up mattering, but the point was I shot before, late enough that he couldn't get a citadel. And, that crazy reload is coming back, right? We're on a quarter HP, and we're on a 22-second reload with fucking overmatching sap. I mean, it's, so something like a Colombo. Colombo just can't make these kinds of plays, Colombo is a turret, right? It is a turret. It parks in a spot. It angles to the enemy. It hopes it just kills them faster than they can kill it. But it can't really make these kinds of plays where you're utilizing speed, you're utilizing concealment, you're utilizing the fast reload to play in and around islands. And that's why, to me, the Lauria is just like way more of an interesting ship. Like I said, in your average World of Warships game, it's 90% plus as good as Colombo. I believe. We're switching to, and I'm a little too flat, so I take some superstructure upper belt pens. We swap to AP there because if I can shoot him in the casemate, we will get unsaturated damage, right? We don't want to just keep clicking sap into a superstructure, especially against German BBs, because you can hit them anywhere on the freeboard, basically with AP for full pen damage. Whereas if I'm shooting sap and trying to get superstructure only, I'm not gonna get the greatest performance, right? So we brought this back to a 3v3. We're only down 1 to 2 on caps. We're even on points. Jaeger kills their Jaeger, which is a huge kill, obviously. Huge kill. Now, unfortunately, my Holland, after helping me incredibly well, is going to just make like the dumbest play in recorded human history. Because he gives up spotting on Edgar, which meant I couldn't kill Edgar with my last salvo. And then he reverses while radared, so he's going to end up dying while denying me vision. It's very unfortunate, but the speed is yet again going to come in clutch. I mean, we've just straightened out, and like we're just flying. We're just flying through here at 34 knots now, right? So we kill this guy, and again, this speed, right? The speed is going to be, because I have to kill this guy, right? I mean, if you look, my Jaeger's about to step on A, but their Edgar is about to step on C. And so I have to kill the Edgar here. And so I'm making the correct play, right? I'm making the correct play of sprinting out before he can tort me, because I'm going to one-shot him. But almost fucked it. I don't know if you noticed that. I don't know if anyone noticed that. I shot a quarter of a second too fast, and my very rear turret hit the island instead of the Edgar. So we almost fucked it. But, I mean, even six of these fucking sap shells, because they hit for like 16,500 fucking damage apiece, right? Just crazy. So 2 really good Lauria games, and the ship is just, it's still super good. I mean, I see this take on the subreddit all the time where people are like, Lauria is good, but there's no reason to get it, because if you want a sap ship, you just play the Colombo. And, dude, I'll be honest, I feel the exact opposite. And that's not saying Lauria is an objectively stronger ship than Colombo. Because again, I'm gonna reiterate, I think Colombo is just probably the best ship you can play in randoms right now. It's top three minimum, right? But I feel almost the exact opposite. I feel like if you want a SAP battleship, you can get a premium version that is way more fun, that is 90% as good in every game, that is significantly better in certain games depending on the enemy's ship lineup. I mean, no comparison. When you're fighting ships like Des Moines and Hindenburg, Lauria is diabolical and Colombo's a punching bag. I mean, a good Des Moines player brutalizes a Colombo. I mean, it's crazy how hard a good Des Moines player bullies Colombo, dude. Um, and a good Des Moines player gets back to port. I mean, their game is unplayable in Deloria, right? Any cruiser with 30 mil deck side plating, 27 nose and ass, unplayable in Deloria. Completely unplayable. You just get 20k clicked on cooldown all game long. Um, and we'll look at the armor, but the deck armor on Laurier is it's a joke, right? It's an absolute joke. Um, but the ship is just wild. I mean, it's still wild. I mean, I just how far the battleship player base has fallen. Where like this ship is just not. This ship is like a miss for steel. I mean, I just don't even know what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have Colombo or Lauria, to me it's a no brainer. Like I could grind the worst BB grind in the game, maybe like second or third worst BB grind in the game, which is grinding to Colombo is horrific. Um, Colombo is also very boring. Or I could get a steel version of Colombo that's way more interesting and dynamic to play, that has potential, a lot more potential in certain games, but is less consistent. Uh, and it's a premium version, so you just slap your captain in another. I don't know. To me, Lauria is still probably like, I'm the biggest incomp dick sucker in this game, as we all know. But I mean, to me, like Lauria is still, it's still up there, like probably second steel BB to get. It's like I'm still getting incomp every time, right? But I mean, Lauria to me, I have almost no desire to play Colombo. Um, it's very uninteresting to play to me, and Lauria is very interesting. Uh, it feels like because your skill matters, and that's really all there is to it. That's not to say Lauria is balanced and Colombo is broken. They're both broken, right? Colombo might be like 5% more overpowered than Lauria, but again, against certain enemies, right? Against BBs, Colombo all day. Against heavy cruisers, Lauria all day. And then the rest of the game, it's kind of what's happening depending on what ship is better, right? But I mean, dude, it's just it. I don't know. My ultimate takeaway for you is like these people on Reddit that tell, or on YouTube and Twitch that tell you you don't buy Lauria because Colombo exists. I just don't think that makes like really any sense. They're just not even kind of the same ship, right? You know, it's like don't get Slava because Kremlin exists. Like that wouldn't make any sense to say that either, right? You know. So, but anyway, let's hop back into the port and go over the build. Okay, equipment, no surprises. To me, it's the standard BB build, assuming all things being equal, right? We're taking cold DCP mod, you know, prop, deal, reload. 19.3 is totally fine. You get a spotter plane, you get a kill with Sansonetti. It's totally fine. Plus, the limited range is way less of a problem on Lauria than Colombo. Number one, you don't have railguns, so it's like you could run range mod. It's definitely an option. It's not like terrible, but of course, Lauria is more of a DPM ship due to sap. Floaty shells make the X range not the greatest. You got spotter, you're gonna get Sansonetti, so you might as well get the DPM. That's how I look at it. And I'm just running the totally bog standard battleship build. You could absolutely run Brisk on Lauria, but I won't be caught dead. Um, my tombstone will say he was running 2.8 A skill when he died. That's what they're gonna say. That's what's gonna be carved over my grave when I pass. I'm just not playing the game in random battles without 2.8 A skill. So now, if you are of the same philosophy, aka have a functioning brain, I mean, like people who don't take this in random battles, I just think need to be put out of their misery, just taken out back. Behind the shed, because it's just like, what are you doing? There's an Utrecht and a PVO and a Willem and a Malta, and Four ships are dropping the sub in your mouth and you don't run 2.8 skill. I don't know. To me, clinically insane behavior. But so what I would say though is you could make a case for dropping ERE because Lauria has very low HP pool. So all things being equal, IRPR is better than ERE. Now Lauria is very tanky, so like, and it has that improved Citadel heal. When you take Torps or a Citadel here or there, you can still heal. So I would say like this is probably overall the best build. But I think there's a very valid case for dropping ERE, and that would let you run like Brisk, maybe even Vigilance. Um, did I say the torpedo protection was bad? Why did I think that? It's dumb. But yeah, you could absolutely drop ERE for, Brisk, grab something else. Brisk, preventative maintenance. The turrets do, I find, kind of get knocked out a lot. I think you even saw that in the second replay. Didn't that GK like gun knock me 2 or 3 times? So you could drop ERE, slap Brisk, slap preventative maintenance on there. Some weird shit like that. I'm just running the standard BB build. And then let's look at the armor. The armor's fucking crazy, guys. The armor is fucking crazy. Crazy. Um, Crazy in multiple ways. It's crazy when you kite against HE spammers because yeah, that's 120 deck. So when Lauria runs away and you're spamming it in your cruiser, there's no cruiser in the game that pens Lauria deck. Very cool. Most BBs. Fun fact: Thunderer doesn't pen this deck. Stay woke, guys. I want to say the only ship in the game that HE pens this deck is Hanover HE. Is that correct? I think that's correct. I think Hanover HE. I think Hanover HE might be the only HE in the game that pens this deck. So that's half your deck. Half your deck is impenetrable to any HE in the entire game, including a shit ton of HE dive bombers. Very cool. Now the front half of your deck is all 32, so when it's kind of weird. Basically, here's the rule in Lauria: bow in, super tanky to AP; stern in, super tanky to HE; reverse, not even kind of fucking true. Stern in, nuked by AP; bow in, farmed by HE. So that's what I mean. There's a little more nuance to the armor, but the armor is crazy. The Citadel is exposed, but here's the thing, right? Lauria has an exposed Citadel. Oh my goodness, exposed Citadel. Oh my goodness. Yeah. But here's the thing. The main Citadel is like an improved Kremlin Citadel that's low in the water. And so this is really what you're aiming at. That's only 350, but it's a small part of the boat. And then you have these weird smokestack Citadels here. And so if we slap the belt back on, right, you have like 350 total because it's spaced and angled. So like 350, this is all Citadel, right? So yeah, you can get nuked when you go flat, but they have to catch you dead center. And then you definitely never kite at close range. Why? Because if we take that off, hang on, let's put the casemate back on, right? So you can see here, if you get shot like right there, take a mental image, there's Citadel behind it, right? And so you can just be shot right at the base of this turret. If you're kiting in Lauria, if you are perfectly stern in Lauria at like 10 kilometers, you can get fucking no shit dev struck by most BVs. So you don't want to do that. So you gotta really know the armor on Lauria. You can't just sail around like a retard. You gotta be able to aim a bit. You gotta be able to pick out parts on the enemy ship. You gotta lead a bit better. So definitely like harder to play than Colombo, but way more fun. Like I said, your average game, it's 90+% is good, and probably 25% of your games, it's way better than Colombo due to the overmatch. It's still a great fucking ship. Still, probably just from a strength level, it's probably like the second in the top 2 steel BBs. I mean, realistically, like I suck the dick of Incomp every game. I mean, what can I say? That's that pencil dick shape of it. It just gets my mouth watering, boys. But yeah, I mean, brand new account, and I'm buying steel BBs. It's probably Incomp first. It's probably Lauria second. Then like probably Willem, Mech, kind of. It's still a great, great, great ship that is absolutely worth getting for steel. No, it is not just Colombo inferior version. That's fucking ridiculous. Yeah, that'll do it for the Lauria inspection. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.